In my 35 years on the bench in Providence, Rhode Island, I have seen wealth walk through my courtroom doors in many forms. I have seen it humble and I have seen it arrogant, and I want to tell you honestly, the humble kind earns my deepest respect every single time. But the arrogant kind, the kind that arrives assuming the outcome is already settled because the bank account is large enough, that kind tests something in me that I have spent 3.5 decades learning to channel correctly. Stay with me, my friends, because what rolled into the parking lot of Providence Municipal Court on a Thursday morning, and what happened to the young man who stepped out of it, is a story that I believe every parent, every teacher, and every person who has ever been handed more than they earned needs to hear. Hit that like button right now if you believe that consequences do not check your bank balance before they arrive. Let me take you to that Thursday. It was late September, the kind of Providence morning that still carries summer's warmth in the air, but signals in the light that something is changing. I had been on the bench since 8:30. Inspector Quinn had us moving through a full docket. 12 cases already by 10 o'clock, the kind of pace that keeps you sharp and leaves no room for distraction. Subscribe to this channel right now, because this story has layers that I am going to peel back one by one, and by the end you are going to feel something you did not expect to feel when I tell you who this young man really was beneath everything that came through those doors first. I first heard about the car before I saw the young man. Inspector Quinn came to the bench during a brief pause between cases and leaned toward me with the specific expression he wears when something unusual has presented itself, not alarmed, not amused, somewhere precisely between the two. He said quietly, "Judge, there is a yellow Lamborghini parked across 2 spaces in the courthouse lot." He paused. "The meter is running." I looked at him. He looked at me. I said, "I see. Thought you'd want to know," he said. "I appreciate that," I said. And then the name was called. Tyler Weston, 19 years old. What walked through my courtroom doors was, on the surface, a study in deliberate presentation. Tyler Weston was tall, 6 feet, perhaps a little more, with the kind of build that comes from a personal trainer rather than physical labor. He was wearing what I can only describe as casual clothing that had been engineered to appear casual. Designer everything, the brands visible without being ostentatious, which is itself a particular form of ostentation. His hair was arranged in the careful way that takes more time than it pretends to. He was wearing sunglasses inside the courthouse, which he removed as he approached the bench with the slow, unhurried movement of someone who has never once in his life been told to hurry up. He was 19 years old. He looked at my courtroom the way people look at things they are passing through. My internal instrument activated immediately, not with anger, with attention, careful, practiced, 35-year attention. The charges were not minor. That is the first thing I need to tell you. This was not a parking ticket. Tyler Weston was before my court on 3 counts, 2 outstanding traffic violations from the previous 6 months, both involving excessive speed in residential zones combined with a failure to appear on both prior notices. Additionally, and this is the part that had escalated a matter that might otherwise have been resolved administratively into a mandatory court appearance, his license had been suspended following the 2nd violation, and he had been cited twice since the suspension for operating a motor vehicle while his license was not valid. 5 violations, 2 failures to appear, driving on a suspended license twice, and he had arrived this morning in a yellow Lamborghini. Tell me in the comments right now what you are thinking. Tell me what your first instinct says about this young man, because I want you to hold that instinct, and I want to tell you what mine was, because mine was more complicated than you might expect from a judge looking at that particular set of facts. I looked at Tyler Weston. He was standing before my bench with his sunglasses in his hand, turning them slowly, not nervously, but with the studied nonchalance of someone performing composure rather than feeling it. His jaw was set, his eyes were clear and direct. He was not afraid, and that specific absence of fear was what troubled me most in those first moments. Not because I want people to be afraid of me. I do not. I have never believed that fear is the appropriate relationship between a citizen and their court. But there is a difference between the calm of someone who is not afraid because they have a clear conscience and the calm of someone who is not afraid because they have never genuinely experienced a consequence that reached them. Tyler Weston's calm was the second kind. I was certain of it within 60 seconds of his approach. "Mr. Weston," I said, "you're before this court on 5 separate violations, including 2 instances of operating on a suspended license. Do you understand the seriousness of what we're addressing today?" "Yes, Your Honor," he said, politely, smoothly. "Do you have anything you'd like to tell me about these violations?" He offered a small, almost apologetic shrug. "Your Honor, I know I should have taken care of this sooner. I've had a busy schedule and—" "A busy schedule," I said. "Yes, sir." I set down my pen very deliberately. "Mr. Weston, let me ask you something. When you drove to this courthouse this morning, What did you drive? A brief pause. My car, Your Honor. Can you describe your car for me? Another pause, this one slightly longer. He understood, I think, where this was going, and I give him credit that he did not attempt a deflection. A Lamborghini, Your Honor. A Lamborghini, I said. And your license has been suspended since, I checked the record. Since April 14th, today is September 22nd, you drove a Lamborghini to a courthouse appearance on a suspended license. He had the decency to look at the floor for a moment. Yes, Your Honor. Hit that like button right now if you see exactly what I was seeing, and subscribe to this channel because I need you to stay with me, because this story, I promise you, is about to go somewhere you are not expecting. I looked at the full record in front of me. 5 violations over 6 months, a suspended license he had driven on repeatedly, failures to appear, and now this morning, a $200,000 automobile in my parking lot straddling 2 spaces with the meter running. The facts were clear. My options were legally well defined. Operating on a suspended license is not a matter of judicial discretion in terms of whether it is serious. It is serious always, because a person driving without a valid license represents a genuine risk to everyone else on the road. That is not an abstraction. People get hurt. People die. The license suspension exists for a reason, and every mile driven in defiance of it is a choice to prioritize your own convenience over other people's safety. I am not soft about that. I want you to understand that clearly. My compassion has limits, and those limits are located precisely at the point where a person's choices endanger others. Before I tell you what I decided, I need to tell you what happened in the 4 minutes before I made that decision, because those 4 minutes are the reason this story matters. I looked at Tyler Weston and I asked him a question I was not certain he was prepared for. I said, "Is there anyone here with you today?" Something shifted in his face very quickly, something that was not the polished surface. "No, Your Honor." "No parent? No family member?" "No, sir." I let that sit for a moment. "Why not?" He was quiet. The sunglasses turned once more in his hand. Then he said, "My father is in Boston. He has meetings." "Did he know you were appearing in court today?" A pause that told me everything before the answer arrived. "I didn't tell him, Your Honor." I nodded slowly. "And your mother?" The polished surface cracked, just slightly, just enough. "My mother passed away, Your Honor, 3 years ago." The courtroom went quiet. I want to tell you that I had not seen that coming. I had looked at Tyler Weston, the Lamborghini, the designer clothing, the studied nonchalance, the suspended license driven on 6 times, and I had constructed, efficiently and professionally, a picture of a certain kind of young person, the kind produced by too much money and too little accountability, the kind who had never been told no in a language they could actually hear. And that picture was not wrong, but it was incomplete. Share this video right now if you believe that incomplete pictures are one of the most dangerous things in the world. Share it if you have ever looked at someone and thought you understood their whole story from the cover, and then discovered there were chapters you had not read. I looked at Tyler Weston with different eyes than I had 30 seconds earlier. Not softer eyes, not eyes that were prepared to excuse what the record showed, but more complete eyes. The eyes of a 68-year-old man who has sat behind this bench through every possible configuration of human circumstance and who knows with absolute certainty that the behavior in front of him and the wound behind it are not always the same shape. "Tell me about your mother," I said. He looked up at me. For the first time since he had walked into that courtroom, Tyler Weston looked his age. Not 19 in the designer clothes and the careful hair. 19 in the way that 19 actually is, young and uncertain, and carrying things that 19-year-olds were not built to carry alone. She was... He stopped. Started again. She was the one who kept track of things, the appointments, the everything. "My dad is good at business. He's not good at you..." He did not finish the sentence. He did not need to. I thought of my own father, the factory worker from southern Italy who was present in the way that truly matters, not with resources, but with attention, with time, with the daily, unglamorous work of actually showing up. I thought about what I had been given that Tyler Weston had apparently not been given, and I felt something that I can only describe as grief on his behalf, not sympathy that excused, grief that understood. "Mr. Weston," I said, "I hear what you're telling me, and I want you to know that I am genuinely sorry about your mother. That kind of loss at your age, at any age, is something I would not wish on anyone." I paused. "And I need you to hear what I'm about to say with the same honesty that I'm saying it." He was very still. "The violations before this court are serious, not because I want to make your life difficult, because they are genuinely dangerous." Do you understand the difference between a fine and a suspended license? A fine is about money. A suspended license is about safety, yours and everyone else on the road. When you drive on a suspended license, you are not just breaking a rule. You are telling every other driver, every pedestrian, every child on a bicycle in a residential zone that your schedule is more important than their safety. I know you do not believe that, but that is the statement your choices have been making for 6 months. His jaw tightened. His eyes were bright. What am I going to do with you? I said, and I meant it exactly the way I always mean it. Not as dismissal, but as the genuine question of someone who cares about the answer. Hit that subscribe button right now, because what I did next is the part that people have asked me about more times than I can count since that Thursday morning. I had 2 options that were legally available to me. The first was a substantial fine combined with an extended suspension and mandatory community service, the standard escalated response to a pattern of violations of this kind. The second, given that 2 of the charges involved operating on a suspended license with prior notice, which crosses from a civil infraction into criminal misdemeanor territory under Rhode Island law, was remand, holding, processing, handcuffs. I want to be honest with you about how hard that decision was, not because the facts did not support it, they did, but because I was looking at a 19-year-old boy whose mother had died 3 years ago and whose father was in Boston with meetings, and I knew that what I did in that room in the next 3 minutes would either wake something up in him or confirm his existing belief that the world was a system to be navigated rather than a community to be responsible to. I chose the harder mercy, because here is what I have learned in 35 years. Sometimes the most compassionate thing I can do is make a consequence real in a way that all the fines and extended suspensions in the world have failed to do. Tyler Weston had paid fines. He had received notices. He had ignored court dates. None of it had reached him, not because he was a bad person, because none of it had cost him anything that he could actually feel. Mr. Weston, I said, I am finding you in violation on all 5 counts. On the 2 misdemeanor charges of operating on a suspended license, I am ordering you held for processing. You will be released on your own recognizance following booking, but you will leave this courthouse today in the custody of the officer. The courtroom was completely silent. Tyler Weston's composure broke, not dramatically, not in the way of someone performing distress, but in the way of someone who has just learned, for the first time in a very concrete way, that there is a room the Lamborghini cannot drive him out of. His face went white. His hands stopped moving. He said very quietly, "Your Honor." "I'm not finished," I said gently. "The fines on the remaining charges will be assessed at the maximum standard rate. Your license suspension is extended by 18 months from today, and I am ordering you to complete 40 hours of community service. Specifically, I want those hours served at the Rhode Island Hospital Trauma Unit in whatever capacity they can use a volunteer. I want you to see, with your own eyes, what happens to people who are hit by drivers who should not have been on the road. Can you do that?" He was silent for a moment. Then, "Yes, Your Honor." "Good." I looked at him directly. "I want to say something to you that has nothing to do with these charges. You are 19 years old. You have lost your mother. You are moving through the world without the person who, by your own account, kept track of things. I understand that, and I am telling you, not as a judge, but as someone who has been watching young people navigate hard circumstances for 35 years, the answer to that kind of loss is not speed and sunglasses and a car that costs more than most people's homes. The answer is to find someone to be accountable to, a mentor, a coach, a counselor, someone who will tell you the truth. Can you do that?" He looked at me for a long moment, and what I saw in his face in that moment, beneath the white shock of the immediate consequence, beneath the designer surface and the careful hair, was something young and real and genuinely searching, something that had been there all along, waiting for a room it could not drive away from. "I'll try, Your Honor," he said. Inspector Quinn stepped forward. He handled it with the dignity and restraint he brings to everything he does in my courtroom. The handcuffs were applied quietly, without theater, without cruelty. Tyler Weston walked out of my courtroom the way he had walked in, tall, straight, but carrying something entirely different in his expression. Not humiliation, something more useful, the beginning of reckoning. The yellow Lamborghini sat in the parking lot for 2 hours before someone arranged to have it collected. Tell me in the comments what you think. Tell me if you believe I did the right thing. Tell me if you would have been harder or more forgiving. I want this conversation because I have it with myself every time I think about that Thursday morning. I thought about Tyler Weston for a long time after he left my courtroom. I thought about fathers who are good at business and not good at the other things. I thought about the specific devastation of losing the parent who was the keeper of the details, the appointments, the deadlines, the steady daily attention that holds a young person's life in its proper shape. I thought about how grief in teenagers often does not look like grief, how it looks like speed and recklessness and the deliberate accumulation of things that announce themselves loudly enough to drown out whatever is quiet and painful underneath. My father was present, genuinely, dailily present, not wealthy, not by any external measure, but there every morning and every evening with his standards and his stories and his absolute refusal to let his children drift without consequence or without direction. I was given something that no amount of money can purchase, and I have always known it. Tyler Weston had the money. He was missing the other thing. About 3 months after that September morning, I received a letter. It had been written on plain paper in careful handwriting, not a child's handwriting, but deliberate, the handwriting of someone choosing each word. Tyler Weston wrote that he had completed 12 of his 40 community service hours at Rhode Island Hospital. He wrote without melodrama that he had sat with a family in the trauma waiting room while a surgeon operated on their 17-year-old son who had been struck by a car running a red light. He wrote, "I kept thinking about what you said, about what the choice to drive says to other people. I understand it now in a way I didn't before. I'm sorry it took me this long." He also wrote that he had called his father, that they had had, in his words, a long overdue conversation, that his father had flown to Providence the following weekend, that they had visited his mother's grave together for the first time since the funeral. I set that letter down and I sat quietly in my chambers for a few minutes, because that is the thing about consequences delivered with honesty and without cruelty. They do not end the story, they begin it. The handcuffs were not the point, the handcuffs were the door. What Tyler Weston walked through on the other side of that door was up to him entirely. He walked through it. That matters more than anything else in this story. Subscribe to this channel and share this video for every young person who is driving too fast through their own life, outrunning something they have not yet found the courage to face. Share it for the parents who are good at business and need to come home. Share it for the mothers who kept track of everything and whose absence leaves a shape in the world that no Lamborghini is wide enough to fill. God bless you, Tyler Weston. Wherever you are a good person. You were always a good person. You just needed someone to make the room small enough that you could not drive out of it. God bless all of you, my friends. Take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. Slow down. Tell me what you would have done in my position. I want to hear from you. But nothing in 35 years on this bench prepared me for what walked through my courtroom doors the very next morning.